Welcome to Collision, the podcast where we discuss the fun and sometimes complicated collision of real life and trusting God. If you're curious or confused about how to engage the world we live in, we hope our conversation here helps. Now, let's get into this episode of Collision.
Well, welcome to the Collision Podcast today. My name is Matt Manning. I'm here with my co-host, Stu Jackson, sporting the Colorado Rockies hat today.
Go team.
Go team. You have faith in your local team. Is that what I understand?
I have faith that we are going to be the best, worst team ever.
Yes. The reality that we could pull off 32 wins in a row and still only be 500.
I enjoy the countdown of how long it is until we're actually thrown out of the league because we're so bad.
You know? Yeah, like there should be some kind of like demotion,
Absolutely.
like English League Soccer.
It's kind of like the wall of shame, but yeah, there's something like that.
I was thinking we should probably do something like that too. Yeah, when it comes to the Rockies, there's not a lot. And unfortunately for me, I prepaid for 6 tickets. Somebody was selling something around the church here. And they're like, hey, Matt, you want to be a part of our fundraiser? You can buy, tickets for pretty cheap. And then here's all the games and you can sit in all these spaces. And I thought, oh, man, that would be really fun. And then I bought several of them. And now I thought, what am I going to do?
It must be you and a lot of other people because last night's game where they lost, they had 24,000 people in the stadium.
Yeah.
I don't know what people are watching. I don't know what they're doing, but they're going to the stadium.
It's more like a bar experience than a baseball
That's
game
all
right
I
now.
can come up with.
Is what it is. Well, despite the sad state of the current local baseball team here in Colorado, what today we wanted to talk about was woke going broke. How you feel about that?
Oh, that's a great one.
Yeah,
Can we keep talking about the Rockies? It's a lot less controversial.
Just step right into it,
Why
Stu.
not?
Let's just lean in. The reason we wanted to talk about this today is there's a brilliant guy out there. His name's Mark Sayers, and he's kind of like this cultural anthropologist, sociologist, pays attention to what's going on in culture. He's from Australia. Like I said, super brilliant. And he put together a podcast and asked the question, is 2024 the year that woke broke? And it's gotten a lot of kind of pub on a lot of cultural commentators.
Absolutely.
Just speaking about it, asking the question, going, what's that look like? And we thought, man, that would be an interesting conversation, particularly from kind of the perspective of church and what that means for the church world. Now, when we jump into this conversation of woke being broke, I think it's important for us just to kind of define the term because in a lot of ways, the term woke has been used pretty widely in our culture.
It's all over the place.
It's all over the place, and it can mean a lot of different things. And so, the sense of woke really, it actually started before 2014, but that I think is really when kind of the cultural philosophy began to kind of take root here in the United States, where in 2014 you had in Ferguson, Missouri, the police shooting of Michael Brown. And in that shooting, the black community rose up, right? And there was protests really kind of throughout that summer. And what rose to the forefront was just the issues of race and race in this country, and caused a lot of conversation, and actually a lot of good conversation came out of that in terms of what was going on and where do we actually stand when it comes to the race issues of the United States. Eventually, after that, woke really moved into kind of the Me Too movement, starting in 2015, 2016, with sexual harassment and what's all of that look like, particularly in the workplace or, from men with power towards women who have less power. Eventually, it came to kind of encompass the LGBTQ rights. Eventually, climate, controversies got thrown in there. And then it became the umbrella term for kind of the progressive or liberal left, the political left of our society, and what they believe when it comes to social issues and all of that. And so that's kind of where it landed here in 2025, is that when somebody says woke, it's really kind of speaking to the political left, the values that they hold socially, the injustices that they're fighting against, so on and so forth. And what is interesting that Mark Sayers asks is the question, is woke broke? And so, Stu, you are a man of the people.
I'm a man of the people.
Is woke
Boy,
broke?
that's dangerous. Right now, there's a lot of people squirming is what's happening to me, man of the people.
There's a lot of people.
First of all, I got to give you props because either you're brilliant, of which I have to believe, or you did a lot of research. So I'm just going to go with brilliant, because running through that outline of where woke came from, that was pretty impressive. Because
Well, thank you.
I mean, I was already lost about, you said 2014 and I zoned out. I'm like, where was I in 2014? I don't even remember now. That's weird. How old were my kids? What was I doing?
Yeah, 11,
so you asked me,
11 years ago. So your kids were in elementary school.
Yes.
Yeah?
Yes, they were. I'm having to do math. Sorry. Eyes roll in the back of your head. It's math. Sorry.
That's it.
Accountant, I am not. So you asked me, is woke broke? I'm a man of the people, you say. Let me put it this way. I hope so.
Okay.
Because what woke is encompassed. So I too, and I know this is going to shock people. Mom, Dad, you watched me study when I was a kid. You know how terrible I am at it. I actually did some research too. I don't know if you can see on your screen right there. I wrote notes. That's handwriting right there. I didn't cheat and use a computer like Matt over there. But you look at it and you look at the all-encompassing definition that woke has taken on. If it's not a norm, let's say, something that has been established over a period of a long time, and somebody else is now challenging that norm, it's woke. And it can be anything. I mean, it's incredible what has become woke or referred to as woke or anything like that. So is woke broke? Yes, I hope so. Because I think it's done a lot of damage. I think that people's embracing of these radical ideas can be really detrimental. And in part because when they embrace these radical ideas, it's their radical reaction to stuff too. It's not a logical, argument. It becomes this emotional argument, which are so dangerous. If you do any sort of mentoring, coaching, anything, I mean, counseling, whatever, the first thing they teach you is do not make emotional arguments, because all you're going to do is lose, because you can't tell somebody how to feel.
Yeah.
When you do that, they get defensive, they start attacking you, you get defensive, and there's a spiral that you just can't believe. Woke, to me, has done a lot of that. It has become this, emotional fight for, whatever's happening. There's not a lot of logic or reasoning in it.
Yeah.
It's that emotional, things like, you mentioned like climate change. People who stand in the middle of the freeway to block traffic, that's not logical at all.
Right.
Right. I believe I told my kids, get out of the street when a car's
Don't
coming.
don't play in the street. Yes.
And here's, 30 adults standing in the middle of a highway expecting people to stop.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So is woke broke? I think the tide is turning significantly.
Yeah.
And it's one of those things that I think throughout history you've seen things like that. You see these big movements, these cultural movements. The thing about this one is it's different than what most of us, whatever generation we are, X, Y, Z, whatever it is, number. I don't know.
Right.
I'm not a boomer. I know that.
Yeah, you'd be Gen X.
I believe so.
And I'm the oldest of the millennials.
You're the oldest of millennials.
Yeah.
I have a lot of problems with you millennials.
We could talk about that on our next podcast too.
But no, so I think it's such a significant shift, and it's happening so rapidly.
Yes.
You see a lot of cultural movements, and they kind of die off, fade away. This has been, you said 2014. That's when it really kind of started to rear its ugly head. And then it was bam, here it is. And it's everywhere instantly. 2024 rolls around, and now we're into 2025, and it's hit the floor.
Yeah, it's almost like the poison pill of our culture today.
Absolutely.
It hit the pinnacle and rolled back. I think that when I think of the woke side of things, and really even before 2014, used primarily in African American culture, it's this kind of like idea of awakening.
Sure.
You've woke up to what's happening around you, and how that term had become very politicized and even polarized, where this whole thing, where I think that ultimately the downfall of woke began to happen is with this cancel culture, where no longer can you and I have differing opinions on name your social issue.
Oh, absolutely.
And if we did, you could throw out you're woke. right? And all of a sudden you're canceled in culture. And we've seen just the cancel culture of the United States and what has happened. And what was really interesting is we had a similar conversation around this podcast within our staff. And one of our Gen Alphas on our staff was talking about this. And he said, for Gen Z and Gen Alpha, it's not cool anymore. And he's like, we all embraced it, through our middle school and high school years and into college. And he said, what changed for us is that every one of us has been canceled in this culture at some point in our lives, right? And so here's these guys who are like, guys and girls who are trying to embrace the woke ideologies and what they are, bent towards and all that kind of stuff. And yet at some point they even found themselves on the wrong side of being woke.
Sure.
And at some level it was like, wait, we can't have conversation.
Which is funny because woke in itself started to get canceled. People started to become intolerant of anything related to or could be conceived of as being woke.
Yeah, and that's actually, like the implications of it, right? Like one of the huge implications of woke, the woke ideology was like the economic backlash that we've seen the last couple of years, from
Absolutely.
Target to Disney to Netflix to the big one, which was Budweiser, right?
Yep, Bud Light. Yep.
And it was like this whole cultural like shift that began to happen probably 2022, where it was like this ideology isn't good. And there was a huge backlash from society that ultimately I think led to the second second term of Donald Trump, right?
Yeah.
Like in 2020,
Absolutely.
it looked like he was going away and never coming back.
Right.
And then because of this cultural turn that's actually happened, we have this whole uprising of not like a Republican Party. I don't know that today's Republican Party is what the Republicans were even 10 years ago.
Agreed.
It's more of a unity party is the way that I would see it, of libertarians who are coming together, who are basically saying, look, you can't tell us how to live.
Right. And I think that's probably more the key than anything with why you're starting to see woke drift away is, and this is from a personal perspective, I got tired of being told what to think.
Yeah.
And not being told what to think because somebody did research or there was, legitimate argument behind it, but being yelled at because somebody didn't like my thought, my belief, if you look 3 years ago, I was a walking, talking woke target.
Yeah. That is totally not surprising to me, Stu.
For some reason. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not like walking around going to protests or doing anything like that. But just who I am as a person, I did not fit a mold of what would be accepted within the
woke ideologies.
The woke ideologies.
Yeah. What's been really interesting to me is the state within which we live, Colorado. For years and years and years, we've watched Colorado move from, a reddish state to purple. Probably people would argue today that it's not even purple, it's blue.
Yeah, very blue.
We have a lot of progressive thought in Colorado. And what I constantly argue is we're less blue in terms of being Democrat and we're more libertarian as a state. That's true of, I would say, the makeup of this church. One of the things I always point to is, the reason that we have marijuana legalized in the state is because of Boulder.
Yes.
They were like, you can't tell us what to do.
Yep.
You can't tell us what to put in our bodies. And when COVID happened, it was Boulder who was following all the legal stops, basically saying, you can't tell us what to put in our body. Right. So it was like, here's these two, political issues that Boulder stands against both of them. And so there is this real kind of libertarian view in Colorado of you can't tell us what to do. And, the gods of independence is big
alive and well in Colorado.
Alive and well in Colorado.
That is the state motto for all intents and purposes.
Right. And so it's interesting to watch this ideology in Colorado over the last several years. And the fight has not been red versus blue. It's been this argument of you can't tell me what to do kind of thing. And one of the most fascinating parts of kind of this woke breaking wake breaking, woke being broke.
We're all over the place.
If that's actually where we're at, is actually in spirituality. And so one of the fascinating things that we've seen is that as cancel culture has diminished, right, and people are no longer afraid to get canceled, that we see this this real seeking of truth happening within the church. So, for example, we have a new believers class, and there are several people of various faiths. It's not just those who are seeking Christianity. It is people of various faiths who are coming in and who are very boldly saying, I don't think I believe what you believe, but I don't know why. And I want to know why. And they're showing up here every week, and they're not afraid of their peer groups canceling them. They're not afraid of this, some kind of backlash because they showed up at a conservative church to figure out what it is that they actually believe and why they believe it, which is fascinating.
Well, yeah, it's that questioning that I think is part of the wokeness.
Yeah.
Starting to fall apart.
Yeah.
I'm looking for lots of fancy words in my head. It's not working well. I got the Rockies hat on and everything's broken.
Keep it simple.
Well,
keep
it really funny.
2025 is the year that Stu broke.
The year that Stu broke. Now, if you ask my wife or my father-in-law Dave, broke was a long time ago. But it's that questioning that I think, because when you talked about woke, you saw people were really talking about political awareness, social injustice, big things like that. And it evolved into a questioning of everything.
Yes.
And if you were different from somebody else, the attack was on, is the way it felt. And now you have this questioning, and you mentioned spirituality and how that all ties in. And I started, doing my research, which again, weird, I know, but you start thinking about it, and that's the piece that woke never really addressed. And so many of these cultural movements never really address the spirituality that somebody has. And, some people will swear that I'm not spiritual at all, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
I believe that everyone, regardless of faith, regardless of whatever your beliefs is, I don't care. At some point, you're going to talk to God.
Yeah.
Whether you do it by choice or you do it by circumstance, you're going to talk to God.
Yeah.
And I think that inside there's that little, maybe deep down inside, that little ball of something that I don't know what it is.
Yeah.
But it's starting to kind of itch at my heart. We talk about the believers class. I believe that's starting to happen in things. That for so long we've been told, and it's been shoved down our throats and pushed down and everything, that you start, that little ball of spirituality inside, questioning what's going on and what's happening, has started to kind of burn a little bit, and there's that little bit of a flame, and they're starting to ask those questions.
Yeah. Well, we're definitely starting to see that. I think one of the huge implications of woke being broke or starting to break in 2024 is really when you see this ideology and culture, it's like 10 years, which is really fast for something within culture to take root and to grab a hold, and then all of a sudden to break apart not in a way that is more progressive, which is how societies typically trend, but actually in a movement that is more conservative. And so what you have in Gen Z, which has been really fascinating to watch, and we're also seeing it in Gen Alpha, is conservative values that even go beyond what you and I hold and are more reticent of the boomers or even the greatest generation.
Yep.
Right? You have college kids who have thousands of dollars in savings because they watched their millennial parents in 2007, 2008 get wiped out by the recession, right? You have in prom dresses the return to a more conservative outfit. Now, you and I look at it and go, well, not really, but from my generation to the next two generations, there's been a change in that. There's been a change in the understanding of like LGBTQ rights, where there is this tolerance to be within culture when it comes to LGBTQ issues, and yet at the same time, I don't actually have to agree with you on this issue. And so anyways, in 10 years, we have seen a major shift happen, which is totally unusual in culture. Totally unusual in culture. Very rarely seen. And actually what I think it's creating is this whole movement of instability. And so the question like that I'm wrestling with as a pastor is, what does it look like actually to help people in as disciples to disciple towards resiliency when the world is changing as fast as it is? Absolutely. And I mean, you're in the computer world. I mean, with AI and everything else, like, you know, what the latest stats are is AI in 2037 is going to be at 1600 IQ.
Absolutely. You say that. So I had a conversation today. I am now working with somebody who's the same age as my oldest son. Uh-huh. Now that's weird to me to know that my oldest son could be standing there working as a a cohort. Yes. It's like, okay, I can't handle this. Yeah. So we started making jokes about something. And AOL came up.
Yeah.
Now for those of you that aren't old enough, which I have to wonder how many are on the podcast, but AOL was really like the entry for people to see what the internet could do.
It's how America got online.
It is America Online. And everybody learned what a CD was, and yes. thousands and thousands. But we were talking about that. He had no concept of what that was.
Yeah.
So you talk about how things evolve. You know, I remember when we first got AOL at home, that was wow. And then you could talk to people in real time. Like chat?
Right.
Wow. Now they had to be online, but wow.
Yep. Or when we got the Palm Pilots and you could use Bluetooth and you could transfer a message from me to you without being connected.
Yeah. I mean, and now you look at what today is. You can't, to sit down and do that, it makes your head spin.
Yeah.
You know, when you talk about that kind of change in technology and everything around you, you know, and that you talk about how to mentor somebody and pastor and do that for people. That's big question. Good luck.
Yeah. Well, you know, I look at it in the church world and just in like humanity, like basically from the early, let's call it the early church years, maybe even past that, say 300-400 AD to the Great Reformation time period. Church didn't change all that much. It basically, for those thousands of years, church basically looked the same. Then you had Martin Luther and the Great Reformation happened, and there was this huge shift that happened in church. You had the Protestant uprising. All of a sudden, you had Catholics and Protestants right in this, and for the next couple hundred years, not much changed. And then you get into the 80s, and you have Saddleback and Willow Creek and these churches that started to think about doing church differently. And so really through the 80s, 90s, and early 2000s, the church looked pretty the same. But just in those like three eras, you went from thousands of years to hundreds of years to decades.
Right.
And now in church world, right, church has shifted probably, at least in my ministry as a senior pastor in the last 5 years, it's shifted twice. And so now we're measuring changes in culture within months, right? We went from decades to years to now we're in months. And in all of that, it goes, what does it look like to really have people who are resilient people? And I think what we're seeing in part of culture, particularly with young men returning to like the Lutheran church or the Episcopalian church, right? These churches that are rooted deep in tradition. One of the fascinating things that happened at Crossroads is this last year we decided to do Lent. We've never done Lent as a church, and people loved it. And it was almost like there was this grounding to something that was bigger than ourselves.
Well, and you mentioned that. Well, okay, first of all, two things. Yes, for those of you that are curious, Matt's immortal. No, he doesn't want a lot of people to know that. But yes, he was around 300 AD in the caves doing all that. Long story.
You can read books, Stu. You can read books. Yeah, right. They'll tell you this kind of stuff.
Yeah, I've seen the movies. But you talk about the change. One of the things that really fascinated me recently, and I know this is a whole nother topic, but the changing of the Pope and Pope Leo XIV.
Yeah.
Now, being a former Catholic, it's different for me. But I watched I watched the whole process of the conclave and stuff like that. And it wasn't just, the tradition of it and the ooh-ah and look in Italy and this is beautiful and the Vatican. I watched it trying to sit in a different seat of what was the world looking at. And you could see this groundswell of people paying attention to this.
Yeah.
And so you talk about Lent and the first time the church doing that, and people loved it. And you see the Catholic Church, this groundswell of people, when the Pope is elected, and people were paying attention.
Yeah.
I mean, you see it on national news, and it's not like, oh, by the way, there's a new Pope, white smoke. Yeah.
Yeah.
It was long stories.
Yes.
It was, serious news articles and stuff about the election of the Pope. So I think, you sit obviously from the role of a pastor to, and you see our church changing and growing and doing all of these things. Soon it's going to be minute to minute.
Yes.
It's going to be kind of, insane to try and keep up with. But you're starting to see it. And I think so is society. I think our culture is starting to see that shift back to, the greatest generation, those kind of things.
Well, I think that when we are in a space where change is constant, and the truth of it is that change is constant right now, that we grab onto anything that provides some stability. And right now, the church is in a really good place because, the church is slow in its movement of change. And we do things still, even in a Protestant, pretty modern church that Crossroads is, that we do things that tie us to the saints of old.
Absolutely.
To practices that were valued, that added significance to people's life, to help people understand where meaning and purpose and what that looked like in their lives. And I think that we're on the edge, culturally speaking, of seeing people at least explore the faith in ways that they haven't probably in the last 20 years. For the first time, just the recent study came out that the church has been in decline in the U.S. for decades now. This year it stopped. It actually hit kind of a bottom. Now everybody's waiting. Is it going to go down or go up? But even in our context, we've seen a lot, particularly young men, who have shown up, who are looking for purpose and meaning and looking for something that's more significant than the life that they're living. And so I think that, for the churches that are paying attention, that this is a cultural moment of whether woke is broke or not. And we can talk all day about whether it is.
Yep.
There's a cultural moment that's happening that people are looking for something specifically that the church has, and will the churches step up? And I think that's the big place of helping people see who Jesus is, who this God is that loves them, that they are created in the image of God, and that by their very being that they have worth and value. And in that, ultimately, that they can find a significance that goes beyond themselves.
Absolutely.
Grounded into that. And so, man, we could talk about this all day.
I could go on for a long time.
Yeah, but we are kind of right here at the end. And so, you got any words to wrap up?
I do. It's one of those things, and I have no illusions. I have no idea who's watching our video, who listens to our podcasts on Spotify and Apple. I wish I did. I wish I could sit on the other side of the camera, see you watching it and answer questions and talk to you about it. But on the off chance that somebody that doesn't know where their faith is and is seeking that, number one, go to church. Go to church. Yeah. And the other thing is what have you got to lose? Yeah. What's the downside of getting to know God and knowing your faith and knowing belief?
Yeah.
That if you get to the pearly gates and there's nothing there, well, you're a better person because of what you were trying to do and everything you were becoming in believing in that faith. And if you get there and St. Peter's waiting for you, and has a few questions that you can answer honestly, and you don't go, I can't answer that. I'm woke.
Yeah.
So I guess to me, take the chance.
Yeah.
Take the chance to talk to somebody. And for those of you that are Christians now and people who are believers in their faith and have faith, what are you doing to share it? Yeah. What are you doing to share your faith? That's the big question for me. That's part of the reason that I sit in this podcast with you is because 10 years ago, no way. But now, I want to share my faith. I want people to know. I want people to see maybe that my actions and stuff like that, they're rooted in some ideas of who Christ was and God is to me. And some days I'm sure there's not. Don't follow behind me in a car. That's all I'm going to say.
There it is. At least like Jesus when you're driving.
At least like Jesus when you're driving. Make sure you're below the dashboard.
That's it.
So nobody
That's
sees
it. So, well, if you are watching and tuning in and you're in the Thornton, Westminster, Fort Lupton, North Metro Denver area and looking for a church, we'd love to see you. We meet every Sunday right here in Thornton. And would love to see you. If you have questions or comments or ideas for us to talk about in the future, we actually set Stu up with an email. It's moderator@crossroadsabc.com.
And if you can't spell moderator like me, info@crossroadsabc.com.
Either one of those will get to Stu. So, Stu, we'll just wrap this up, and we'll hope for better days when it comes to the Rockies.
One thing too. However you're watching it, YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcast, however you're doing it, hit the like button. And you have people say, why? It doesn't matter. Yeah, it does. There are, and we could go scary here. Just this will be another podcast someday. They know who you are. They have analytics that say who you're like. So somebody over in Nebraska, though I'm not sure that I'm not going to do that to those friends in Nebraska.
I think what you're trying to say is if you like us, like us.
If you like us on your app. For YouTube, it's the thumbs up. But if you do that, then they use that in their analytics and algorithms, and they may put that information in and pop our podcast onto somebody else's YouTube suggestions. And we grow, we spread the word, and it's good for everybody.
Yeah. Well, thanks for Stu for joining me today, and we'll see you in about a month.
All right, Mayor. Thanks, Matt.
Thank you for listening to Collision. This podcast is a production of Crossroads Church in Thornton, Colorado. For more excellent content, please visit crossroadsabc.com.